In this video we will discuss about the discoveries and facts of origin of the universe, earth and life. Basically the term evolution usually refers to the biological evolution of living things, but the processes by which planets, stars, galaxies and the universe form and change over time are also types of evolution. In all of these cases there is change over time, although the processes involved are quite different. In the late 1920s, the American astronomer Edwin Hubble made a very interesting and important discovery. Hubble made observations that he interpreted as showing that distant stars and galaxies are receding from Earth in every direction. Moreover, the velocities of recession increase in proportion with distance, a discovery that has been confirmed by numerous and repeated measurements since Hubble's time. But Hubble's hypothesis of an expanding universe leads to certain deductions. One is that the universe was more condensed at a previous time. From this deduction came the suggestion that all the currently observed matter and energy in the universe were initially condensed in a very small and infinitely hot mass. A huge explosion known as the Big Bang then sent matter and energy expanding in all directions. As the universe expanded according to current scientific understanding, matter collected into clouds that began to condense and rotate, forming the forerunners of galaxies. Within galaxies, including our own Milky Way galaxy, changes in pressure caused gas and dust to form distinct clouds. In some of these clouds, where there was sufficient mass and the right forces, gravitational attraction caused the cloud to collapse. If the mass of material in the cloud was sufficiently compressed, nuclear reaction began and a star was born. Some proportion of stars, including our sun, formed in the middle of the flattened spinning disk of material. In the case of our sun, the gas and dust within this disk collided and aggregated into small grains, and the grains formed into larger bodies called planetesimals. The rocky planets, including Earth, were near the Sun, and the gaseous planets were in more distant orbits. The origin of life cannot be dated as precisely, but there is evidence that bacteria-like organisms lived on Earth 3.5 billion years ago, and they may have existed even earlier when the first solid crust formed. Almost 4 billion years ago, these early organisms must have been simpler than the organisms living today. Furthermore, before the earliest organisms, there must have been structures that one would not call alive, but that are now components of living things. Today, all living organisms store and transmit hereditary information using two kinds of molecules, DNA and RNA. Each of these molecules is in turn composed of four kinds of subunits known as nucleotides. The sequence of nucleotides in particular lengths of DNA or RNA known as genes direct the construction of molecules known as proteins, which in turn catalyze biochemical reactions, provide structural components for organisms and perform many of the other functions on which life depends. But many religious persons, including many scientists, hold that God created the universe and the various processes driving physical and biological evolution, and that these processes then resulted in the creation of galaxies, our solar system and life on Earth. This belief, which sometimes is termed theistic evolution, is not in disagreement with scientific explanation of evolution. Indeed, it reflects the remarkable and inspiring character of the physical universe revealed by cosmology. Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. Scientists think that by 4.3 billion years ago, Earth may have developed conditions suitable to support life. The oldest known fossil, however, are only 3.7 billion years old. The origin of life is one of the great mysteries in the universe. To determine the origin of life, scientists are investigating the problem in several different ways. Some scientists are studying life on our own planet, some scientists are seeking out life on fossil life, on other planets or moons in our solar system, and other scientists are trying to detect life in other solar systems either by measuring life effects on the atmospheres of distant planets or by measuring artificial radiations like radio signals that may be produced by advanced life. The scientific theory of evolution by natural selection was conceived independently by two British naturalists, Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, in the mid 19th century as an explanation for why organisms are adapted to their physical and biological environments. The theory was first set out in detail in Darwin's book on the origin of species. Evolution by natural selection is established by observable facts about living organisms. First one is more offspring are often produced than can possibly survive. Second one is that traits vary among individuals with respect to their morphology, physiology, and behavior. Third one is different traits confer different rates of survival and reproduction. And fourth one is traits can be passed from generation to generation. However, in successive generations, members of a population are therefore more likely to be replaced by the offspring of parents with favorable characteristics for that environment. In the early 20th century, competing ideas of evolution were refuted and evolution was combined with Mendelian inheritance and population genetics to give rise to modern evolution theory. In this synthesis, the basic for heredity is in DNA molecule that pass information from generation to generation. The processes that change DNA in a population include natural selection, genetic drift, mutation, and gene flow. Natural selection is the engine that drives evolution. The individual organisms with the variation best suited to survive in their particular circumstances have a greater chance of passing that trait on to the next generation. But plants and animals interact in very complex ways with other organisms and their environment. These factors work together to produce the amazingly diverse range of life forms present on Earth. By understanding natural selection, we can learn why some plants produce cyanide, why rabbits produce so many offspring, how animals first emerged from the ocean to live on land, and how some mammals eventually went back again. We can even learn about microscopic life such as bacteria and viruses, or figure out how humans became humans. Basically, the survival of the fittest term made famous in the fifth edition, published in 1869 of On the Origin of Species by British naturalist Charles Darwin, which suggested that organisms best adjusted to their environment are the most successful in surviving and reproducing. Darwin borrowed the term from English sociologist and philosopher Herbert Spencer, who first used it in his 1864 book Principles of Biology. Darwin did not consider the process of evolution as the survival of the fittest. He regarded it as survival of the fitter because the struggle for existence, a term he took from English economist and demographer Thomas Malthus, is relatively and thus not absolute. Instead, the winners with respect to species within ecosystem could become losers with the change of circumstances. Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection basically entailed three crucial elements: variation, reproduction, and heritability. Variations in the physical features of organisms that tend to benefit an individual in the struggle for existence are preserved and passed on because the individuals that have them tend to survive. The success or failure of a given variation is not known when it emerges. It is known only retrospectively after organisms that possesses either grow and mature and pass it to their own offspring or fail to mature and reproduce. One such protoplanet was our Earth. Over time, the protoplanet Earth kept getting bombarded by other space rocks, which caused intense heat. This heat melted the rocks and metals, and as a result, the heavy material sank to the center, forming the Earth's core. The lighter materials floated to the top and formed the Earth's crust. After the Earth's surface cooled down, it started to rain for millions of years. This rain formed oceans, and the Earth's atmosphere was also created. The atmosphere consisted of different gases like nitrogen, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and small amounts of other gases. Over a long period, these simple life forms evolved and became more complex. They started to develop new features and structures such as cells with a nucleus. This led to the emergence of more advanced organisms like algae and eventually plants. As time passed, animals evolved from these early organisms. They gradually developed different body structures, enabling them to move and adapt to different environments. From small and simple creatures, more complex animals emerged, including fish, reptiles, mammals, and eventually humans. Throughout this evolutionary process, various factors such as changes in the environment, competition for resources, and genetic mutations played a role in shaping the diversity of life on Earth. Different species evolved and adapted to different habitats, leading to the incredible variety of life forms we see today. The first universal common ancestor is a proposed non-cellular entity that is the earliest ancestor of the last universal common ancestor, Leuca, and its descendants, including every modern cell. Fuca would also be the ancestor of ancient sister lineages of Leuca, none of which have modern descendants. Fuca is thought to have been composed of progenitors proposed ancient biological systems that would have used RNA for their genome and self-replication in place of DNA. By comparison, Leuca would have had a complex metabolism and genome with hundreds of genes and gene families. Fuca would have been the first organism capable of biological translation, using RNA molecules to convert information into peptides and produce proteins. This first translation system would have been assembled together with primeval, possibly error-prone genetic code. Fuca would also be the first biological system to have genetic code. In the reduction hypothesis, where giant viruses evolved from primordial cells that became parasitic, viruses might have evolved after Fuca and before Fuca. After that, the ability to generate oxygen via photosynthesis likely first appeared in the ancestors of cyanobacteria. These organisms evolved at least 2.45 to 2.32 GA and probably as early as 2.7 GA or earlier. Scientists have known that algae and land plants evolved after a more complex organism with a nucleus known as eukaryotes. These ancient eukaryotes swallowed a photosynthesizing bacteria which are commonly known as blue-green algae or cyanobacterium. While it is accepted that cyanobacteria are the ancestors of the chloroplast, it is unclear which of the cyanobacteria are closest related to the chloroplast, when this association first appeared in geological terms, and in which type of habitat this association first took place. This new study shows that the chloroplast lineage split from their closest cyanobacterial ancestor more than 2.1 billion years ago in low salinity environments. It took another 200 million years for the chloroplast and the eukaryotic host to be intimately associated into a symbiotic relationship. Basically, chloroplasts are descended from a type of single-celled organism called a cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria are photosynthetic bacteria that are sometimes called blue-green algae. The land plants arose from the green algae, and together land plants and green algae are sometimes called viridiplantae. The main candidates for the living green algal group most closely related to land plants are the stoneworts. After that, the origin of mitochondria take place. Mitochondria and chloroplasts likely evolved from engulfed prokaryotes that once lived as independent organisms. At some point, a eukaryotic cell engulfed an anaerobic prokaryote, which then formed an endosymbiotic relationship with the host eukaryote, gradually developing into a mitochondrion. Eukaryotic cells containing mitochondria then engulfed photosynthetic prokaryotes, which evolved to become specialized chloroplast organelles. Eukaryotes constitute the domain of eukarya organisms whose cells have a membrane-bound nucleus. All animals, plants, fungi, and many unicellular organisms are eukaryotes. They constitute a major group of life forms alongside the two groups of prokaryotes, the bacteria and archaea. Eukaryotes represent a small minority of the number of organisms, but given their generally much larger size, their collective global biomass is much larger than that of prokaryotes. Icaria virotia is an early example of a worm-like bilaterian organism. Its fossils are found in rocks of the Ediacara, member of South Australia, that are estimated to be between 560 and 555 billion years old. A representative of the Ediacaran biota, Icaria lived during the Ediacaran period, roughly 15 million years before the Cambrian, when the Cambrian explosion occurs and where widespread fossils evidence of modern bilaterian taxa appear in the fossil record. Over 100 Icaria fossils have been found. These are simple imprints resembling a small grain of rice, slightly thickening to one end. The interior-posterior differentiation may indicate that Icaria was a bilaterally symmetrical animal. No other details of Icaria anatomy were found on its fossils. On the same sandstone bed, there are numerous trace fossils of the time Helminthrodictines. The animal that produced such traces moved or burrowed through thin layers of well-oxygenated sand on the ocean floor, as it sought sustenance and appeared to show sensory and seeking behavior, turning as it moved. It is thought to have moved by peristalsis constricting muscles against the animal's hydrostatic skeleton and may have possessed a column, mouth, anus, and through gut in a similar way to a worm. Similarly, Eusthenopteron, genus of extinct lobe-finned fishes, preserved as fossils in rock of the late Devonian period. About 370 million years ago, Eusthenopteron was near the main line of evolution leading to the first terrestrial vertebrates, the tetrapods. It was 1.5 to 1.8 meters, 5 to 6 feet long, and was an active carnivore, with numerous small teeth in its broad skull. The overall pattern of the skull bones is similar to that of early tetrapods, but the vertebral column was not very well developed in that the vertebral arches were not strongly fused to the vertebral spools, and the arches did not interlock between vertebrae as they do in tetrapods. Blastoid, any member of an extinct class, Blastoidea of echinoderms animals related to the modern starfish and sea lilies, that existed from the middle Ordovician to the late Permian period from 472 million to 251 million years ago. Blastoids were sedentary animals anchored to the sea floor by a stem-like column of circular plates. Unlike other echinoderms, blastoids were characterized by a regularity of structure. The blastoid body region consisted of 13 plates of calcium carbonate, an external framework or skeleton arranged in 3 circles about the body. The discovery of well-preserved palps and a partial pelvic fin from Tiktaalik rosae, a 375 million year old transitional species between fish and the first-legged animals, reveals that the evolution of hind legs actually began as enhanced hind fins. This challenges existing theory that large mobile hind appendages were developed only after vertebrates transitioned to land. Actually, dolphin brain involve completely different writing from primates, especially in the neocortex, which is central to higher functions such as reasoning and conscious thought. Dolphins are so distinctly related to humans that it's been 95 billion years since we had even a remotely common ancestor. Yet when it comes to intelligence, social behavior and communication, some researchers say dolphins come as close to humans as our ape and monkey's cousins. The earliest well-known amphibian, Ichthyostega, was found in late Devonian deposits in Greenland dating back about 363 million years old. After amphibians, the tetrapods and their ancestors, which were essentially bony fish that were starting to develop adaptation for life on land. The evolution of bony fish has been critical to the development of the first tetrapods on Earth and hence all amphibians, reptiles and us mammals as well. Tetrapods include all land animals with four limbs like amphibians, snapsids and sauropsids. Based on the latest paleontological and genetic evidence, here is a brief look on what evolutionary events likely happened which led the first amphibian. The first major groups of amphibians developed in the Devonian period around 370 million years ago from lobe-finned fish which were similar to the modern lungfish. These ancient lobe-finned fish had evolved multi-jointed leg-like fins with digitals that enabled them to crawl along the sea bottom. Some fish had developed primitive lungs that helped them breathe air when the stagnant pools of the Devonian swamps were low in oxygen. Reptiles arose around about 320 million years ago during the Carboniferous period. Reptiles in the traditional sense of the term are defined as animals that have scales or scutes, lay land-based hard-shell eggs and possess ectothermic metabolism. Reptiles first arose after early tetrapods in the swamps of the late Carboniferous period. Increasing evolutionary pressure and the vast untouched niches of the land powered the evolutionary changes in amphibians to gradually become more and more land-based. New research has identified the fossil dental records of the oldest known mammal, Brachyloden quadrangularis, a small shrew-like animal that measured around 20 cm in length and had two sets of teeth. The dental records date to 25 million years ago, 25 million years after the Permian-Triassic mass extinction, event that led to the extinction of roughly 70% of terrestrial vertebrate families. The time when the monotreme line diverged from other mammalian lines is uncertain, but one survey of genetic studies gives an estimate of about 220 million years ago, while others have posted younger estimates of 163 to 186 million years ago. Although the already Eutherian Euramia is dated to 161 to 160 million years ago. Basically, there are three groups of mammals: the Eutherian or placental mammals, the marsupial mammals, and the monotremes. These groups are divided into two clades. The Eutherian and marsupial comprise the clade of Therian mammals and monotremes from their sister clade. Marsupials are found primarily in Australia, though the opossum is found in North America. Australian marsupials include the kangaroo, koala, bandicoot, Tasmanian devil. Eutherians are the most widespread of the mammals occurring throughout the world. There are 18 to 20 orders of placental mammals. Some examples are Insectivora, the insect eaters, Edentata, the toothless ant-eaters, Rodentia, the rodents. The aquatic mammals include whales, carnivora. Carnivorous mammals include dogs, cats, and bears, and primates, which include humans. Eutherian mammals are sometimes called placental mammals because all species possess a complex placenta that connects a fetus to the mother, allowing for gas, fluid, and nutrients exchange. While other mammals possess a less complex placenta or briefly have a placenta, all eutherians possess a complex placenta during gestation. Monotremes. There are three living species of monotremes, the platypus and two species of echidnas or spiny ant-eaters. The leathery-beaked platypus belong to the family Ornithochidae, whereas echidnas belong to the family Sticky Tongue. The platypus and one species of echidna are found in Australia, and the other species of echidna is found in New Guinea. Monotremes are unique among mammals as they lay eggs rather than giving birth to live young. The shells of their eggs are not like the hard shells of birds but are a leathery shell similar to the shells of reptile eggs. Monotremes have no teeth. Today we recognize that evolution takes place through a combination of mechanisms: mutation, genetic drift, gene flow, and natural selection. These mechanisms are called the forces of evolution, and together they can account for all the genotypic variations observed in the world today. Mutation is basically the first force of evolution. We will discuss in mutation and for good reasons. Mutations is the original source of all the genetic variations found in every living thing. Let's try again to imagine all the way back in time to the very first single cell organism floating in Earth's primordial sea. Based on what we observe in simple single cell organism today, the organism probably spends its lifespan absorbing nutrients and dividing to produce cloned copies of itself, while the numbers of individuals in that population would have grown. The second force of evolution is commonly known as genetic drift. This is an unfortunate misnomer as this force actually involves the drifting of alleles, not genes. Genetic drift refers to random changes in allele frequencies from one generation to the next. The genes are remaining constant within the population. It is only the alleles of the genes are changing in frequency. The random nature of genetic drift is a crucial point to understand. It specifically occurs when none of the variant alleles confer an advantage. The final force of evolution is natural selection. This is the evolutionary process that Charles Darwin first brought to light, and it is what the general public typically evokes when considering the process of evolution. Natural selection occurs when certain phenotypes confer an advantage or disadvantage in survival and reproductive success. The evolutionary history of the primates can be tracked back 57 to 90 million years. One of the oldest known primate, like mammal species Platypus, came from North America, and other Archaeopteryx came from China. Other similar basal primates were widespread in Eurasia and Africa during the tropical conditions. A primate is any mammal of the group that includes monkeys, apics, and humans. The other primates, with its 300 or more species, is the third most diverse order of mammals, after rodents and bats. Humans are primates. Physical and genetic similarities show that the modern human species, Homo sapiens, has a very close relationship to the another group of primate species, the apes. Humans and the great apes and gorillas share a common ancestor that lived between 8 and 6 million years ago. Humans first evolved in Africa, and much of human evolution occurred on that continent. The fossils of early humans who lived between 6 and 2 million years ago come entirely from Africa. Most scientists currently recognize some 15 to 20 different species of early humans. Scientists do not all agree, however, about how these species are related or which ones simply died out. Many early human species, certainly the majority of them, left no living descendants. Scientists also debate over how to identify and classify particular species of early humans and about what factors influence the evolution and extinction of each. Early humans first migrated out of Africa into Asia probably between 2 million and 1.8 million years ago. They entered Europe somewhat later between 1.5 million and 1 million years. Species of modern humans populated many parts of the world much later. For instance, people first come to Australia probably within the past 60,000 years and to the America within the past 30 years or so. The beginnings of agriculture and the rise of the first civilization occurs within the past 12,000 years. Early human fossils and archaeological remains offer the most important clues about this ancient past. These remains include bones, tools, and any other evidence, such as footprints, evidence of hearts, or butchery marks on animal bones left by earlier people. Usually, the remains were buried and preserved naturally. They are then found either on the surface or by digging in the ground. By studying fossilized bones, scientists learn about the physical appearance of earlier humans and how it changed. Bone size, shape, and markings left by muscles tell us how these predecessors moved around.